Hello YouTube, welcome to yet another Elder Scrolls lore video. But before we begin, I would like to do some shameless self-promotion for my Steam group, the Elder Scrolls Scholars Guild. I just started it as a way to engage in lore discussion and, well, to share with you what videos I'm working on and when they will be uploaded. So if you like that, consider joining. But now let's talk Elder Scrolls lore. This time I will be talking about Pelinal Whitestrake. But first I will have to make a little apology to all the people requesting this video. From the first moment this channel started growing, it has been a request that, well, came by at least once a month. But I did not really feel like I knew enough about him, so I just remained it on the to-do list. But now, several months later, I think I can do it, so let's kick off. The first question I asked myself when I first read the name Pelinal Whitestrake was, who is he? Well, the short answer is, he was the Divine Crusader, one of the two champions of Queen Alicia during a rebellion against the Aelids. Then many of you might wonder, who is Alicia and who are the Aelids? So I will give you a short explanation on the events in the First Era and then follow it up with the story of Pelinal Whitestrake. In the early First Era and before, Cyrodiil was ruled by an ancient elven race called the Aelids. This race of Mer were a bit like the High Elves, except they worshipped all gods, Aedra and Daedra simultaneously. The Aelids conquered all of Cyrodiil and made the human tribes that lived there into slaves. This all ended when Queen Alicia started a rebellion and eventually conquered all of Cyrodiil, establishing the First Empire. Then the question is, where in this does Pelinal Whitestrake fit in? Well, I want to start with his origin. It is said that Pelinal Whitestrake was brought to Nirn by the god Shor to aid all mankind in its struggle. Once he was put on Tamriel, he started wandering and helped the humans establish armies and kingdoms. But he always remained wandering after every completed conquest. But his story truly begins after a battle with some Aelids. It was then that day that he heard of Alessia's rebellion. He then went to her camp holding a mace and a sword, completely covered in Aelid blood, and then joined her cause for freedom. During this rebellion, he saw it as his own mission to slay every last of the Aelid kings in combat. And so he did. After just 1 year he had driven the Aelid armies past the river Niben, and the east part of Cyrodiil was now officially claimed by the Alessian rebellion. He then freed the slaves of northern Cyrodiil and with them claimed the northern parts also for the Alessian rebellion. Then, with help of the ancient North from Skyrim, he drove the Aelids back into central Cyrodiil. It was during this time when Huna, Pelinal's apprentice, died. He had cared greatly for this apprentice, and when Huna was killed by an Aelid king, he went into a mad rage as he and his armies completely destroyed Aelid cities in revenge. This rage was ended when Alessia herself prayed to the gods to make the madness end. Her prayers were heard by the gods because the gods themselves reached down to Pelinal and calmed him down until he had gone back to his former self. In the meantime, almost all of Cyrodiil was conquered, and the Aelids were driven back to what would later become the Imperial City and the White Gold Tower. There, Alicia hesitated to march upon the city, and Pelinal Whitestrake then decided to go in alone, so he could kill the evil half-elf king Umaril the Unfeathered. There his most famous battle occurred. He was met by many soldiers and summoned Daedra, but he managed to slay them all. But he was then weakened and for the first time was bleeding. He was then surrounded by the last Aelid kings and their summoned minions. He then, according to legend, cracked the floor with his own sword. This made the kings flee into the city, and Pelinal then yelled into the city that Umaril should reveal himself rather than hide. Now that Pelinal was wounded, Umaril had the courage to fight him. This epic battle went on for hours, both severely damaging the others, but ultimately Pelinal cut off Umaril's unfeathered wings, and this injury caused Umaril to finally lay dead. Then Pelinal laughed about how ugly the half-elf king actually was, but this insult enraged the fled Allied kings, and they came back, now overwhelming the injured Pelinal. He was then cut into many pieces, but they made sure his head was left alive for him to witness their deeds. That night, everyone in the Alessian camp heard the last screams of Pelinal. And the next morning, when they attacked, the city was completely deserted, for Pelinal had killed everyone in sight except for the kings, who fled the night after cutting him. The other champion of the Alessian army, Pelinal's best friend, then found his head, still alive on top of the White Gold Tower. They then had a long conversation about Pelinal's regrets before he died. Later, it turned out that Umaril had pledged himself to Meridia, who had made sure he survived, only to return to Tamriel at the end of the Third Era. Then the hero of Kvatch, or the player in the Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion, will get a vision of Pelinal, and after that Pelinal Whitestrake is never seen again. This was quite a long story, and I already hear the angry commenters type about how I did not mention a lot of important names. Well, I purposefully let them out, since I wanted to make clear who Pelinal Whitestrake was and not make it more confusing for non-lore experts by throwing around the names of ancient elven kings. That said, there's a little more to say about Whitestrake. Since he was made by the gods, he does not have a name. His name, Pelinal Whitestrake, is simply one of the many names he has. Pelinal stands for Glorious Knight, or Starlight Knight. And he was called Whitestrake because of his white hair. He has many other names like Pelinal the Blamer, Pelinal the Bloody, and Pelinal the Third. This last one was given to him because some people claimed he was a reincarnation of earlier heroes and that he was only the third in the line. Another thing about him is, as you must have concluded after hearing his story, that he mostly went to action before he really thought about any of the risks. Like, charging into a city full of hostiles is usually not the best idea. This mentality made him sometimes hard to interact with, as he was sometimes impatient and did not care for petty politics. Therefore, he did not respect a lot of people. The only people we know of whom he truly respected were Queen Alicia, his best friend and the second champion of the rebellion, Moraos, and the man Huna. As for the last one, it is hinted in the games that Pelinal and Huna had a secret loving relationship. This is because of a line removed from the book by Bethesda. It reads, a hoplite who Pelinal Whitestrake often shared a tent with at night. The reason this was removed is because the player in a sense becomes him in the Oblivion DLC Knights of the Nine, and Bethesda did not want players to think that his character or her character was homosexual by default, as this is something the player must decide himself or herself. Well guys, I hope I gave you some insight into who Pelinal Whitestrake was and what he meant to Tamriel's history with this video. Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, consider liking and subscribing, as it helps the channel out a great deal. As always, do not forget to check out the Steam Scholars Guild I made for more lore discussion. There I also post on what videos I'm currently working, and you can submit new video ideas. For those without Steam, I also read almost all comments, so keep the video suggestions and also overall feedback coming please. That said, I will see you all later.